It was a stormy Friday night, the kind that makes the skin crawl and the heart race. Sarah was expecting her friend Mark to come over for a movie marathon. They had planned it all week, a much needed distraction from the mundanity of everyday life. Sarah heard a knock at the door, earlier than expected. Peering through the peephole, she saw Mark, drenched from the rain, his usual grin plastered across his face. Relieved and excited, she quickly ushered him in. The night started off well. They laughed, shared stories, and were halfway through the first movie when Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Mark reading, "Hey, running late. The rain is crazy. Be there in 20." A cold shiver ran down her spine. If Mark was texting her now, who was sitting beside her on the couch? Panic set in. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to piece together the situation. The figure beside her, who looked exactly like Mark, turned and smiled. "Everything okay?" he asked, a hint of something sinister in his voice. Sarah, trying to mask her terror, nodded and excused herself to the bathroom, her mind screaming for a way out. In the bathroom, she frantically texted the real Mark, explaining the situation. No response. The house seemed to close in on her, the walls pulsating with a malevolent energy. She peeked outside, only to see the imposter calmly watching TV, as if nothing was amiss. As minutes stretched into an eternity, Sarah heard the front door open. Relief washed over her as she thought of the real Mark coming to her rescue. But what she saw made her blood run cold. Another Mark walked in, just as confused and soaked from the rain. The two Marks faced each other, an air of confusion and horror between them. Sarah, caught in the middle, felt the world spin. But which one was her friend? And which one was the imposter? The atmosphere turned electric, a storm brewing within the confines of her living room. As the tension reached its peak, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Thunder roared, mirroring the chaos inside. In the darkness, a struggle ensued, grunts and shouts filling the air. Sarah, paralyzed with fear, could only listen as the sounds of conflict reached a feverish pitch. Then silence. The lights flickered back to life, revealing a scene of horror. One Mark lay motionless on the floor, a pool of blood expanding around him. The other Mark stood over the body, panting, his hands covered in blood. He turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with tears and confusion. It had to be done," he said, his voice trembling. Relief and grief washed over Sarah as she approached her friend. But as she got closer, a chilling realization dawned on her. The Mark on the floor, the dead one, had a familiar scar on his hand, a scar the real Mark had gotten during a childhood adventure they had shared. Mark standing before her, the killer, was the imposter. Before she could react, the imposter lunged at her, a twisted smile on his face. Sarah's scream was cut short, and the room plunged into silence once more. The twist, however, doesn't end there. As the imposter stood over Sarah's body, his form began to change, contorting and shifting into a dark, shadowy figure. It let out a guttural laugh that echoed through the empty house. The figure wasn't just an imposter. It was a malevolent entity that fed on fear and confusion, luring its victims into a deadly trap.